Hi, welcome to Talking IR. I'm Greg Secord from OpenText in the NERI virtual chapter, and my guest today is Chaya Cooperberg, VP of IR and Corporate Communications at Progressive Waste Solutions. Hello, Chaya. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Greg.
So today we're going to talk about conferences, IR conferences. I know that both of us have been talking together about some of the trends we've seen. Notably, there seem to be more attendees at the conferences, and more companies seem to be attending now as well, whether that's the economy or just changing the markets. I'm interested in what your strategy has been, how that's changed over the last year. Are you going to more conferences than you were last year or the year before?
We have a really full conference schedule coming up this year, and I would say there are more conferences than last year. Although our level of sell-side coverage has not changed, it just seems that the big firms, the big brokerage firms are having their large conferences, and some of the smaller firms are starting to introduce more conferences as well, more sector-specific conferences. So we have a full conference calendar. There are some large conferences, some small conferences, Canada and the U.S., both very large sort of macro view conferences with many industries participating, and some that are just very focused on our sector.
So how do you differentiate? What do you think gives you the best traction? Is it being at the big name conferences, or is it how do you balance, I guess, is what I'm asking? And what are the benefits of one versus the other?
They both serve very different purposes. I find, generally speaking, that the large conferences attract a very broad mix of investors, and it's there where we have the opportunity to attract investors that may have not looked at our space or looked at our company before. Whereas the smaller conferences, we really see investors focused on our sector, which is waste services, or environmental services. They get very interested in that sector specifically and come to see us with another handful of companies, maybe 10 to 12 companies. And so you're speaking to people that understand the space already and may already have a position in the sector, may even have a position in us already. So I tend to use both for different purposes. And the large conferences as well, there are opportunities, if necessary, for just me to go on my own and give a broad overview of our company and our sector, whereas I find the smaller conferences, they know our business already and they want a CEO meeting.
So clearly you're finding this an effective use of your time and your management's time. Are you noticing there's more attendees at these conferences than there were some time ago?
Yeah, well, I hope the attendance is up this year because we're making the investment in going to them. But even in the past year, I did see attendance pretty strong, even at the large conferences. They're being held in cities that are big draws. Somewhere in Florida, somewhere in California when the weather is cold in the Northeast. So you do see people heading down south for them.
What about Europe? Have you thought about extending your conference activities there? And you're seeing a lot of demand for IR conferences in Europe right now.
I've seen a little bit more activity than I have in the past in terms of invites, but we haven't made the leap to actually attend and present at one of the European conferences yet. It's a huge expense, and we feel that to make it worthwhile, we would need to combine it with a roadshow and combine it with some good marketing. And we just haven't had the opportunity to identify the right conference combined with the right cities for a marketing tour yet. I could see that, though, in the next year as a potential option.
So this is interesting because you're talking a little bit about your strategy. What about your messaging? You've talked about different conferences and how you go to these different conferences depending. The investors are going to be somewhat different. Do you find that your messaging changes, or do you really go in with the same message and save kind of for the one-on-one meetings to drill down?
They are different messages. When you're at a larger conference, speaking to a broader group of investors, our messaging is very much around, what makes our sector a good one to invest in, and really explaining the profile of the sector, what our positioning is within our broader industry group. And then when we get into the smaller conferences with the investors that are very familiar with this industry already and familiar with our history, and we've most likely met with some of these investors, if not all of these investors before, it gets right into the weeds. You know, we're talking about the real fine details of our business that a broader investor would not be familiar with yet.
So the last thing I was wondering is the level of involvement and control in the planning for these conference and these one-on-one meetings that you're having there. When you go to investor conferences, I mean, you know, you really have two choices. One is you can involve yourself deeply in who you're seeing, and the other is you can, you know, trust the organizers in the firm. How do you manage that? Do you have a balance? Do you have a particular mandate you work with?
We don't go to an investor conference where we are not actively engaged with the logistics group there and the scheduling group there to make sure that we see the people we want to see. You know, if I'm bringing my CEO out and maybe even my CFO out, it's a huge investment, money and time, and we don't leave those things to chance. We're very careful about making sure that we have a good one-on-one schedule, that we're meeting with investors that are appropriate and not just ones that the sales team at these firms want us to see. And we'll often, frankly, most of the time, we're reaching out to those investors ahead of time as well, and making sure that when we go into that one-on-one meeting, we're well prepared for what that investor wants to discuss.
I mean, what this is basic. I mean, from my perspective, you're exercising, you know, best-in-class approach, which is, you know, making sure that your time invested and your executive's time invested is targeted appropriately. And I think that's, you know, it should be recognized that is really, you know, what would be best in class, at least in my view. Lastly, you know, you're planning this out for next year. There's budget. There's other things. Are you finding you're having to give up other activities in IR for the CEO's time? And how do you judge when you know you've got your CEO for, let's say, 4 days in a quarter? How do you make a judgment of saying, you know what, one of those days has to be here versus maybe doing your own marketing roadshow somewhere else? What do you use to equate that? How do you gauge that internally?
Well, it's hugely challenging. I only get, as you said, a couple of days a month, a couple of days a quarter of his time. When we have good conferences on the calendar, they're quality conferences, I'm confident in the attendance, and I know we have good one-on-one meetings lined up there. For this year, my strategy actually is to give preferential treatment to those conferences, at least for the first 6 months of this year, ahead of other marketing events, other, you know, road shows that we do, because I actually am that confident in the quality of the conferences. And we are, in fact, adding some time onto those conferences just for us, adding a day or a half day even to do some marketing in and around those cities. Wow. So, you know, turning it into a, you know, an integrated approach, conference plus some marketing.
That's excellent. Great insight. Chaya, you know, thank you again. You know, clearly you run a world-class IR program, and we appreciate your insight into investor conferences. Thank you for talking IR. I'm Greg Sequoia.